Welcome and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm Sandra Wong, author of the award-nominated Lola Stark novels and Crescent City short stories. I'm honored to be president of the Sisters in Crime 2020-21 National Board, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator for this panel, Family Reunion with Sisters in Crime Past Presidents. If this isn't the panel you thought you were attending, I invite you to stay anyway. We are going to have a lively and thoughtful conversation about artistic and career longevity, about the role of community, about this collective machine we call publishing. Plus, we never judge anyone for choosing pajamas over sweats. So, with me here through the magic we call technology are 5 past presidents of Sisters in Crime, who also represent the best and brightest in crime writing. Crime fiction writing, crime nonfiction writing. So please allow me to introduce them now. And if I stumble over any of this part, you can blame the stars in my eyes. So here we go. Sara Paretsky helped transform the mystery world in 1982 when she introduced Private Eye V.I. Warshawski in Indemnity Only. She and V.I., tough, credible, street smart, and feminine, challenged the stereotypes of women in fiction as victims or vamps, and made it possible for a new generation of crime writers and fighters to thrive. In 1986, she organized a small group of women who wanted to advocate for women in the mystery world. In 1987, the group formally adopted the name Sisters in Crime. The holder of numerous awards, Sara has been awarded both the Cartier Diamond Dagger and MWA's Grand Master, as well as Ms. Magazine's Woman of the Year. Sara's books have been published in 30 countries. 1, 2, 3, that's 30. BoucherCon 2020 Guest of Honor, Catriona McPherson, was born in Scotland and lived there until immigrating in 2010. She's a full-time writer who hopes never to have a proper job again. To that aim, she writes the Dandy Gilver series of preposterous 1930s detective stories set in the old country, the Last Ditch Motel series of humorous contemporary mysteries set in the new country, and a strand of psychological thrillers including this year's Mary Higgins Clark nominee, Strangers at the Gate. Catriona lives on 20 scruffy acres in Northern California with a black cat and a scientist. Hank Phillipi Ryan is the USA Today best-selling author of 12 thrillers, winning the most prestigious awards in the genre: 5 Agathas, 3 Anthonys, the Daphne, and the coveted Mary Higgins Clark Award. She is also on-air investigative reporter for Boston's WHDH-TV with 37 Emmys, I'm not going to do that on my hands, and dozens more journalism honors. Book reviewers call her a master of suspense. Her novel, The Murder List, is a current Anthony, McCavity, Agatha, and Mary Higgins Clark Award nominee. Hank's newest novel, because that's not enough, is The First to Lie, which the Publishers Weekly Starred Review calls stellar. Hank lives in Boston with, luckily for her, a criminal defense attorney husband. Frankie Y. Bailey is a criminal justice professor at the University at Albany, SUNY. She specializes in crime history and crime in mass media / popular culture. Frankie's nonfiction books include Out of the Woodpile, Black Characters in Crime and Detective Fiction, and African American Mystery Writers. Her books featuring Southern crime historian Lizzie Stewart are being reissued, and she's working on the 6th. She has 2 police procedural novels featuring Albany police detective Hannah McCabe. She's working on a standalone historical thriller set in 1939, and Frankie is a past EVP of MWA, and of course, past president of Sisters in Crime. Lori Rader-Day, last but not least, is the Edgar Award nominated and Anthony Award and Mary Higgins Clark Award winning author of The Lucky One, Under a Dark Sky, The Day I Died, Little Pretty Things, and The Black Hour. She co-chairs the mystery conference, Murder and Mayhem, in Chicago, and just finished her year as the national president of Sisters in Crime. Her next book, Death at Greenway, is based on a little-known moment in history when a group of Londoners were evacuated from the Blitz during World War II to Agatha Christie's summer estate. Look for that in 2021. I know I will. Okay, one more very important thing before I kick off our discussion. We are all on Indigenous land. On behalf of the panelists and myself, I humbly acknowledge that we are settlers on the original lands of the Pawtucket and Massachusetts peoples, of the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca peoples, of the Potawatomi and Miamia peoples, of the Patwin peoples, and of the Cree, Métis, Blackfoot, and Plains Cree people. We are grateful to live and create on Indigenous lands, and I encourage everyone to explore the work of contemporary Indigenous writers, artists, leaders, academics around us, and respectfully consider how their work informs our lives and our practices for the benefit of all. So for many artists right now, not to mention throughout history, I think we've been grappling with our place and the place of our creative work in times of turmoil. So let's start our conversation with this question. Do you write to reflect and or interact with the real world? How and why or why not? So Frankie, let's begin with you, please, because you write both fiction and nonfiction. And I think there could be an interesting crossroads in that discussion. So.
Yeah, my first, actually the second book in my Lizzie series to be published was based on my dissertation about my hometown in the early 20th century. And I'd written the dissertation for academics, but I wanted to do something for real people. And so the book was a way of getting into that. It was about a lynching. Lynching that was not what you would think of as a lynching, because the police went to the door and there was a shooting and some other things happened. But I turned that into a murder mystery. And since then, I've been doing a real life crime, using that as inspiration. So I'm looking at the past and then looking at Lizzie, who's up to 2004 right now in that series. And then with the Albany novels, I'm looking at police procedure because I study that when I'm looking at mass media, popular culture, and race and crime. And so I want to look at those intersections. But I don't actually write about policing as an academic. So writing about it in mysteries is one way of getting at that. I always want to provide, I want to answer the why for my audiences, provide context. So I'm doing both education and entertainment at the same time. So actually, it's really interesting, to go back and forth between my research and writing mysteries and pull the research into the mystery novels.
Yeah, yeah. Who would like to go next? Anyone? Off of that?
Who's going to follow that? Right, not me.
Yeah.
You do really interesting stuff.
Thank you, Frankie. Okay, I'll go. Well, I'll go, and then it'll be a transition from those heights, and then we'll bounce back out of me. I was thinking about this. I mean, I don't. My stories are preposterous. The historical ones, the modern series that's set in California, the first one, I was thinking about it, and I was just about to start writing it when we were at BoucherCon in Raleigh. So that's 2015, right? So the first one I wrote in 2015, and the strapline was the lighter side of the dark underbelly of the California dream. And it was breezy, breezy, breezy. And then the second one I wrote in late 2016. Yeah. And it was considerably less breezy. And then the third one, which is the one that's out just now, it's like, those pictures you see of Ripley from Alien. You see her all lovely, and then you see those pictures. The third one is still technically a comedy. And I'm going to start the fourth one. This book that I'm writing just now is due in at the end of October, so I thought I'd take a few days off and maybe start it on November the 4th. So let's see what that is. But, but very closely, these comedies about American life are impacted by what's going on outside my study, for sure.
Because they impact you.
It's not that funny, That's
no. The third book is the laughs were a little bit harder to find. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
And it makes sense. I mean, everything that happens to us has to go into the book. Into the books. When I think about writing, what I care about, what I have I've been a television reporter for 40 years, an investigative reporter for 40 years, and what I've cared about every day is truth and justice. I mean, this is what I think about all the time. And as a fiction writer, I can talk about that in a different way. You know, is truth is there a true truth? Is it just what someone tells us? Is it what we hope to be true, what we believe to be true? Is it what someone tells us over and over and over? How is it
that the mystery is the ideal place for that. It's where it's the form of fiction where law, justice, and society intersect naturally. So it's the ideal form. It doesn't mean that you have to be writing about truth, justice, freedom, all these things, but if you care about them, and this is the place to turn them into fiction.
Oh, completely so. I mean, it's a way of doing it. I mean, our books are fast-paced, fun, compelling, page-turning thrillers. Of course they are. But if we can put something else underneath that, if we can have people come out and say, you know, next time I'm on a jury, I'm going to think about the story the prosecution tells and the story the defense tells in a kind of a different way. I'm going to think about truth in a different way. I'm going to think about what does justice
I think this means that nobody in Louisville, Kentucky ever read any of your books before they got on the grand jury.
Well, you know, I can remedy that. But see, this is such a human thing. And what we do, I think, in crime fiction is take these concepts, truth and justice, all highfalutin, and make them about real people and allow readers to fight someone else's battle and dissect someone else's troubles and make someone else's decisions and then realize something about ourselves as a result of being someone else in the pages of a book.
I don't start from such a grand place. I'm just trying to tell a story of a crime, but the things that are going on around me inevitably seep into my books. And then my books focus on white collar crime, and there's just so much more of that every day that I sort of feel like I'll never run out of stories. I'm just hampered by, I'm just so angst-ridden these days that I'm in awe of all of you sitting there and writing away. I'm just not.
Oh, we're not.
Raise your hand if you're writing away. We're not writing. Nobody's writing away. I mean, I don't know anybody who's really writing away. I mean,
I'm sure there are people who are writing away.
I am now, but it took me 50 days to do 11 days work starting in March.
Yeah.
But now I am.
Now, and I've been on page 143 times. So,
I like hearing you talk about, you know, the real life seeping in almost by accident, Sarah, because that makes me feel a little bit better about me stumbling into crime fiction as I did, and sort of stumbling through every single story I've told since. And then getting to the end of the first draft of the first book and realizing that there were, you know, social implications to the story that I had not meant to be there. I was just trying to tell a story. I didn't know what I was doing. But by the end of the first draft, there was something in the story that I had no idea it was going to be there. But it actually made the book so much better to go back then and revise with that a theme, I guess, you know, there. So, and it's something if I try to do it on purpose, it doesn't work.
And it's interesting. I read an interview with David McCullough once, of historian David McCullough, and he was asked, do you have a theme for every book you write? And he said, yes, I do. And I write the book to find out what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was just so perfect.
Yeah. So what I hear you all saying is, you know, you are storytellers, and that's what matters to you. And in that, working through your stories, all the many, many different stories you each have, everything else about life and the world sort of filters in there. And at some point, you figure out what it is. Maybe by the end of that draft, at the end of the book, like Laurie was saying, maybe partway through. But that's, as Sarah was saying, that's one of the best things about the crime writing genre, the crime genre, right? So
like when people say, doesn't it feel like a straitjacket, you know, to write crime? And you think there's someone who's never written crime. Because it's such a complete free-for-all, I think.
Maybe someone who never read crime.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe two. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that would be a great tagline. Crime, a great free-for-all.
God.
Just go with that.
Crime fiction. Give it a shot before you
Give it
judge
a
us, all right?
Don't say it. I read somewhere that there was some conversation between two people, and someone asked, why do you write about crime when the world is so terrible? And the answer was, I don't write about crime, I write about justice. And
Oh.
that sort of puts a different light on it.
Yes, it does. So that's a great segue for me into the next question that interests me is about publishing in general. So I think that we all know that there are lines delineating genres in publishing and marketing. At the end of the day, we just write what we write. But I'd like to focus a little bit more on your actual experiences in publishing. So, are your experiences publishing with large houses or multinationals? Are they with smaller presses? Have you done both? How have you professionally or personally experienced the ways publishing has changed over your career so far? And if you don't mind, Sarah, could we start with your perspective here?
It's because I'm the oldest.
Because you have the most illustrious
Because I have
and long career.
our career arc. And publishing has changed enormously in the almost 40 years that I have been published. I was lucky to start when there were still many independent houses and when publishing was still, when books were still mostly sold through independent bookstores, because I'm not sure I'd have the career I have if I'd had to rely on Amazon and Costco to get my books in front of readers.
Mm-hmm.
So my agent sent my book to 40 different houses before he found a publisher for my first novel. And I was lucky because there were 41 houses. And the 41st one published my book. It was a small house that then went under. It was one of the first casualties of what became a cascading wave of conglomeratization. So publishing has consolidated, and it's meant that for a handful of writers, there are enormous financial rewards. And for most writers, the financial rewards are much less than they used to be. Before the era of consolidation. When the big television or movie studios started buying publishing houses, they started imposing, this is my perspective, so I can't offer you a scholarly paper on this, but they began imposing the star system under which studios operate on publishing houses. And so you started having writers like Grisham and Cornwell getting $12, $15 million advances per book, which meant that all of the promotional money had to go into supporting that handful of stars, and it just sucked everything away from the rest, from mid-list and new writers. So a lot of the changes, in my opinion, have been very harsh. On the other hand, the rise of the internet has, despite the dominance of Amazon in the marketplace, in the selling end of the marketplace, the rise of the internet and internet selling has created a way in which ordinary people can start not leveling the playing field, but start raising their own profiles and not to be quite so dependent on the money available in the industry. So I think it's been mostly sad. You can't go back where we are, but there are ways in which current technology is really helpful for all writers, and especially for new writers.
Yeah, thank you. So Frankie, I know that you publish academically as well as, as a fiction writer. What has your experience been?
It's a lot easier to get published as a nonfiction writer.
In general.
But I shouldn't complain, though I actually didn't really have a hard time getting my first book published because I've been working on it for 5 years. And then another criminal justice professor gave me a tip about an imprint that a very small family-owned press in the South was getting started. And I had a Southern detective, and I sent the manuscript off. And actually, I did have enough sense to actually write an email before I sent it off, but they said send it along. And it was very easy. And so then I did those 5 books with that press, but it went under because they were, the press is still there, but the imprint went under because they were trying to get out so many books so quickly and they didn't have the marketing capacity. And so then I later just stumbled again on an editor who was interested in the Hannah McCabe series. So, but then that was with St. Martin's, and when they began to get rid of those mid-list offers, so that was orphan, and so it's out there. I'm going to do something with Hannah again, but she's sort of sitting out there right now. And so right now I'm back with Speaking Volumes, and they bring out all 5 of the books in the Lizzie series, and I'm doing the Sits in the Book. So it's Sits in the series, I should say.
Yeah. So, I mean, what about Catriona, Hank, Lori? Like, are you each with large publishers? And what's your experience? It's always been that way for
both.
you?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm still with a large publisher in London with a bit of Hachette, it's Hodder and Stoughton. And to a certain extent, I wrote this 15-book series has meant that there's a kind of continuity. So the first one came out in 2005, and I'm just finished the most recent one now. I think the biggest change for me, apart from moving, which was a big change, the biggest change for me is the change similar to or related to what Sarah was saying, that when I started, an editor had a budget. So an editor just had a pot of money, and if and it was usually she, loved a book, then she published that book. So she didn't have to convince everyone round the table in a room. Whereas now, sometimes I think, an editor can love a book, and as long as it's, I don't want to say bland enough, but as long as it's not going to upset anyone else round the table so that no one hates it, no one else has to actually love it. And it just feels very much like, in one way it's nice because you and your editor conspire together to get this thing done, like a plucky little band. But it's hard not to feel a bit wistful for the days when all it was one person saying, love it. And then a year later it was in the shop.
Yeah.
But Sarah, that's true what you say. We are where we are. We can't hark back to incontinently, even though I just have.
I always think of the story of Faulkner and Dashiell Hammett, who were great drinking buddies in New York. And Faulkner's editor was Bennett Cerf, and Hammett's was Blanche Knopf. And their editors would come around, and there they were, drunk as skunks, claiming to be having deep philosophical conversations that were so deep that they would start on Thursday morning and wake up on Monday not knowing even where the weekend had gone.
Yes.
But, that your editor would actually come around and check up on you. When I go to New York, no one's going to come see me. I have to go see them. And nobody's going to come see me in Chicago. If I died tomorrow, they'd be happy because they could issue my backlist and make some money. But other than that,
no, they wouldn't.
They'd be alone then.
No, they wouldn't.
They'd be very lonely.
Sarah and I have the same editor, so I know that that's not true.
Oh, she'd wait 2 days.
I'm going to tell her you said that. So I started with a small press. That was your original question. A small press that eventually sold the imprint that did the crime fiction. But I actually got moved up to Harper, to the big leagues before that. So I sort of missed that. My first 2 books are still with them though. And it's interesting to see the changes that have happened. That imprint was sold to a different publisher, and it just seems like the theories of how they want to operate are very, very different between one small press and the other small press. And then now I'm with William Morrow, with the same editor that Sarah has now. And I've had really good luck. So I don't have a lot of like, oh, can you believe it stories. I did get orphaned once, and I thought, here we go, right? I've heard all the stories. Here we go. But I was also adopted in the same phone call. Another editor had sort of reached in and said, I'll take her. And it was a higher ranking editor. So I follow up a lot. That's what I do.
falling up is a good thing. I've had that experience as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I was such a newbie when I started. I was 55 years old when I started writing, but
Oh,
still so completely new. But someone said to me, I remember, well, you have to be careful with the publisher because it's all about distribution. And I said, oh yeah, distribution.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no idea, nothing, absolutely nothing. But talking about publishing and what gets published, I started out with Mira, and now I'm with Ford, which is part of Macmillan. So wonderful, both of them. But I remember when I started writing and talking about what publishers want, I had my first book, which was called Prime Time. And my agent said to me, oh, I can sell this book in a second. People are really ready for an older main character. Everybody is tired of 21-year-old girls with their first shoes and their first boyfriend and their first job. You have a smart, older, successful female main character. This is going to sell like crazy. So I'm like counting my dollars. And she says, the world is really ready for an older heroine. So I said, great. And she said, exactly how old is she though? And I said, well, I made her my age. She's 55. And my agent at the time says, oh, that's too old.
Too old.
That's too old.
Wow.
So I said, okay. I was new. My book wasn't sold. I would do anything. I was new. I said, well, how about 46? Is 46 too old? And she says, no, 46 is not too old. So I made Charlie McNally 46 and the book sold. That is funny and sad and poignant and, evocative and illustrative and all those other words that show, just sort of like we're all saying, it depends on the time and it depends on the person and it depends on the luck and all those sorts of things.
I've just remembered something that happened. Just you saying that, Hank, I've just remembered something that happened to me when I was just about to have my very first book brought out. It was Constable and Robinson in London, and I got brought down to London and taken out for lunch. And they were talking, about clothes and shoes and boys and cars. And I thought, we got to sort of pudding, like second bottle of wine stage. And I said, shouldn't we talk about the book? And the publicist said, oh no, we don't need to talk about the book. We just wanted to find out if you were boring or awful, because if you're boring or awful, there's no point in putting any marketing money behind you.
Oh,
wow.
So that must be my problem then.
And I remember thinking, oh my God, and then thinking, oh, well, probably I'm not boring and awful then, or they wouldn't have told me.
So they were testing you. They were really testing.
Yeah,
That was a test.
Or did they just
it was
in the wine?
Yeah, so it was like similar to your, oh no, not 55, 46, oh maybe. Like, I like the book, but we've got to check you out because otherwise what's the point?
And also she had just told me that I was too old.
Yes.
I said I made her my age, and she's like, no, too old.
Yeah.
And that was a moment for me as an author as well, when I sort of think of myself as sort of the poster child for starting a new career at midlife. And she at that moment was saying, and she wasn't, she was just being realistic. She was just telling me the truth. And I embraced that. And I'm grateful for it because it made a difference. But, there's a harsh reality right in your face.
Yeah.
I want to circle back to Catriona's comment. I'm not sure that I agree that editors are wanting something that's anodyne.
No, I don't think editors are. I think
but
not editors at all.
And how they pitch it. There are a lot of layers to this, and we don't have time to unpack them all. Maybe I should just shut up now.
I hope I'm wrong. I'll take that. No, I hope I'm wrong.
That editors are still very, very devoted to the word on the page and want
definitely, absolutely,
good books, well-written books. And then as soon as I started talking, I was remembering that I wrote a book that wasn't in my series. I was under contract, and I told them when I signed the contract that I was going to do a book that wasn't in the series. I did not hide this. And then I wrote the book that wasn't in the series, and they were like, it's not in the series. And I said, it's in the contract.
Like I said.
And they didn't want to publish it. It was a book called Ghost Country. And that was a book I really struggled with, and that's a long story that I won't take up time with. But so now I'm going to contradict what I was just contradicting.
That is life.
I used to be a marketing manager for a big international financial company based in Chicago, and when I finally quit my day job, I hung on to a few of my little power suits, and so I hauled one of them out, black suit, white silk shirt, the stockings, the heels. This was before the internet, so it was before PowerPoint. Am I the only person who remembers transparencies?
No.
I do.
Transparencies. I came into New York, and my agent was with me, and I showed them how this book was really not different from anything I'd written before, and it was very much like other things in the marketplace. It was just a little bit different than other things that were in the marketplace. And at the end of the meeting, they said, "Oh, fine, we'll publish it." And I left with Dominic, and I said, "Oh, that was way too easy." Because of the way you came in dressed with your PowerPoint slides, that you looked like you were a member of the corporate world, not a writer. And then
Those slobs.
I came home and said to one of my brothers, who's a lawyer, I said, really, their favorite writers are dead writers, because they can harvest all of the money from what they're publishing, and they don't have to worry about a marketing budget and all of those things. And he said, okay, the next time you have a controversial book, go to New York, have Dominic put you in a coffin and wheel you to the So I offer that free of charge to anyone listening as a marketing strategy.
Write that down.
So that's an interesting way for me to segue, because without going into the corporatization of publishing, it does sound, as you say, Catriona, and you have said, Sara, that editors nowadays, I think, sort of need to make a business case for the books that they love. And that's maybe what we are not so thrilled with as artists ourselves. So that's what I'm hearing. So on the like the other end of the spectrum from corporatization in publishing is the idea of community, our crime writing community, which is another question I wanted to bring to this panel. You are all past presidents. Thank you so much for your service to Sisters in Crime, especially, I think I can say this, especially Sara, for being one of the founders, if not the founder. I know people sometimes refer to you as the founding mother. I don't know how you feel about that term, but that's the one that's used.
I like to call her big sister.
Yeah, you're our big sister. Awesome. So can we talk about that? Can we talk about, the fact that we all know publishing is a business, but how has being of service to the writing community coexisted with that truth for you? Has it shaped your career, and how, or has it not at all touched your career? Who would like to tackle that?
I'll
Lori.
go first, because my career is the shortest. And I can tell you that I walked into my very first BoucherCon not knowing, I think I knew one person in the entire building of about 2,000 people. But I met someone there who said, "Oh, you have to join MWA and you have to join Sisters and you should go do that, and I'll tell you what happens next." So I did that, and then in my very first meeting at MWA, my local chapter, I became a board member. No, first meeting was the newsletter editor. Second meeting was board. I mean, they can just sense when someone walks in like me, who gets a little anxious around volunteer opportunities, right? And I prior skills through my day job made me a good candidate for this stuff. But so I have literally been in service to one organization or the other since almost the first day.
Right.
One of the changes in my publishing career coming up is kind of the post Sisters event, which I am interested to see what that looks like. But I think it's one of the best ways to be in this community, because you get to be sort of clued in very early. You get to ask people nosy questions, and especially if you're the newsletter editor, you get to connect with people, and they know your name because you're interviewing them, or you're making things happen for other people, which it feels better. It doesn't feel like me all the time. It feels like I'm in service to other people. And meanwhile, I'm learning and I'm meeting people. It's helping me get where I want to be, but it's also helping other people, which just feels much better.
Yeah.
Can I go next, Sandra?
Yes, please.
In a really, really concrete way, the year that I was president of Sisters in Crime, I think saved me as a writer, because I had just said yes to the third book I was going to have to produce in a year. After I'd said yes to, I didn't say yes to Sisters in Crime, I said yes to Laura Di Silverio. Of course I did, right?
Yeah.
And also I'm the youngest of 4 sisters, so I had never said no to a big sister. Unfortunately, I'd never been in charge of anything in my life. But Sisters survived. But that year, so I already had 3 books to write, and I was president of Sisters in Crime, and I had unexpected abdominal surgery early in the year, and then 6 weeks later I fell over and broke my arm.
Right.
And I think if I'd just had 3 books to write and I still had no stomach muscles and I had a broken arm, I would just have curled in a ball and said, I can't. But I thought, this is going to be so visible and I'm going to look so bad. I can't do this. I am the president of Sisters in Crime. I'll just have to truck on. And so I did. And sincerely, I think I would have just curled in a ball without Sisters to make me keep looking like there was a reason I was the president that year. So thank you.
First of all, your year was, everybody in this block had something happen during their year that was pivotal and moved the group ahead. And Catriona, yours in particular, you've all had amazing years. And I remember when, look behind you, Catriona, at the books behind you. I mean, this is a lovely and wonderful and warm, and you have our books behind you. Nobody asked you to do that. That's
I've got
what
these
you
4 books.
thought of yourself, and that is just so epitomizes Sisters in Crime. I mean, we all, when I talked earlier about not knowing what distribution was, this is how we find out. And this is how we find out that we're not the only ones who are feeling terrified. We're not the only ones who think we can't do it. We're not the only ones who suddenly have no idea how to write a book or what to do or where to go. And, I remember when Kathy Pickens took me aside and said, we want you to be the next president of Sisters in Crime. I just burst out laughing. I said, I know nothing. I am new. I have no idea. And she said, and she swears she didn't, but I know she did. I'm a reporter and I remember. She said to me, you won't have to do anything.
Oh, yeah, do you know, Laura said that to me. Laura said 2 hours a week. 2 hours a week for Laura is not 2 hours a week for me.
That's true. Yeah, she's quite amazing. I think they have this.
What year were you president?
What year?
Frankie.
Oh, Frankie.
Oh, I actually wrote it down because I knew I was going to forget. Let's see, it was,
You were 2012, were you?
Yeah, yeah, it must have been.
Yeah.
Because it was coming out of that period. I had just done MWA, and so MWA ended on 2010, so it was 2011, 2012, I think.
Right.
Is that right? Because I guess I was president of MWA as you were leaving the executive secretary.
Yeah, because I had been with Lee Chow.
The board.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
I just would like to know for what was the hardest thing for your year as president?
I know Lori's
Don't
answer.
scare Sandra. She's a flight risk.
2 hours a week, right? A couple of hours a week.
Right. No, you don't have to do anything.
No, I
Yes, I don't do
just
anything.
wanted to start with Frankie, if I could. What was
Of
the
course.
biggest challenge, and how did?
Yeah, this is going to sound weird, but after MWA, because I had a really bad year it was a wonderful experience, but it was a bad year because that was when the recession was happening and I couldn't spend any money. And that was also when there was that flap over things going on in the romance area where they were coming up with this imprint that we had to disapproved the publish. So it was all, I mean, I thought it gotten through the year, it was going to be okay. And then all of a sudden the romance thing blew up. And so, I was forced to, take action. And so coming to Sisters in Crime seemed warm and fuzzy after that. I mean, it seemed like a really wonderful place to be because I love MWA and I still work for MWA, but it was nice to come to a place that was very warm and calm and welcoming, and it just felt great after that. So I didn't really have a bad time. It was a good year for me.
That's wonderful.
One thing I regret, though, is that I didn't get the Eleanor Taylor Bland thing until Catriona comes along, and she eventually does that, because I didn't really feel comfortable trying to do that as an African-American president of the organization.
I'm sorry about that. The
That was a
organization
really
has
pivotal-
evolved in so many ways since its beginning that I mean, I couldn't be president now. I don't have the skill set to run it now.
You want to try? You won't have to do anything.
Yeah, apparently you don't have to do anything. It's just like an hour a week. Fine. It's fine. So I do see that our time is kind of short, and I'm sorry I didn't get everybody able to speak on that topic. Are there any final thoughts you would like to share about what we've been talking about for our audience, thinking about publishing, how to serve their community in crime writing, anything like that?
I'm just going to jump in. I know I've been talking too much and I'll be brief, but
Not at all.
is something in my life that I am incredibly proud of. And I think that what we have done to mentor younger or newer, not necessarily young writers, is so valuable. We've created a community. We've helped women have a voice, and just made so much possible. And it's just something that I feel really passionately about.
Yes.
I would like to say very, very briefly to Laurie, I was so timid and tentative and only really functioned through email or behind a podium when I was the president. But you just kick over tables, and it's been wonderful to watch it.
Yeah.
I mean, burst down doors and kick over all the tables and go to the bar. So
There have been a lot of tables lately this year, Catriona, and also, may I point out, a pandemic.
Yes.
So that was the most challenging thing of my presidency.
Yeah.
As we film this, it's not quite over, but I would like to point out that Sandra Wong is going to be fantastic at this job.
Thank you.
This
I believe
community
you.
is going to be in such good hands. So
Yes.
it's thrilling to see.
So official.
It's thrilling to see so many great people wanting to be on the board and to lead and to serve. We're in very good hands.
I mean, it's interesting because we had Beth with us the whole time, who does the institutional memory and who absolutely knew everything. But I do think that one of the, seeing all of you, I was at an event yesterday. It was a Zoom funeral of all ridiculous things of a really fabulous man who was the Chief Justice of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. And, someone wrote in the chat, which is just, again, insane. Thank you for all you've done for us. We have the watch. And that's how I feel when I look at all of you now. I think, Sandra, you have the watch now, and we're going to all rely on you to carry on what Sarah started.
Yes. I'll see what I can do. 2
hours a week.
2 hours a week. I'll do that.
Where's BoucherCon next year if we're able to be live?
New
I believe
Orleans.
it's New Orleans.
So
in
It's in
August.
August.
You in New
Yeah.
Orleans.
Yeah.
August?
See
Yeah.
whether your hair is still black or
A little silver.
Well, you know what? Just really, really quickly about that is I won't be doing this alone, right? As you all know, during your time, it takes the entire board, it takes our membership, it takes everybody who feels strongly about equity in this industry, right? For crime writers. So I am so privileged. To be a part of this and to be one in the chain. I'm also really excited to be the first Asian Canadian president for Sisters in Crime, representing So anyway, thank you so much.
It was nice to you, Sandra, in the hopes
Thank you so much.
So nice to you, Sandra, in the hopes that you'll sign our affidavits for immigration.
Yes, yes. You know, I've got a Google Doc. I'll send you the secret link.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's later. Don't worry. Gotcha. I want to thank you, Lori and Frankie and Catriona and Hank and Sarah. Thank you so much for your time
Thank
and
you,
energy
Sandra.
today. Also, thank you for your service in the past. I know that none of us here who are members of Sisters in Crime, none of us are here without all of you and everything you put into it. So thank you. I hope everyone enjoys VoucherCon 2020 online, and whether you're in your pajamas, your sweats, or your favorite romper, if you're eager to join a vibrant, inclusive community of crime genre loving siblings, then join us. Find us online. We're writers, readers, booksellers, librarians, sometimes all at the same time. So we're at sistersincrime.org. Thank you, and stay safe, everyone. Happy writing, happy life-ing, wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandra, thank you.
Well said.